little deeper with your background, because you have such a fascinating story, Danielle, and I didn't know this until we just recently started talking and sort of discussing your background. But you come from a family that was active in the civil rights movement. Tell me more about that.
So, if you're local to Montgomery, the name and you sort of grow up knowing. Um, I am a granddaughter of the Smiley family, and my maternal grandmother, Thelma Smiley, was such a phenomenal woman, just phenomenal. And she had a ton of brothers and sisters and grew up on a farm and, just the life that you would expect, a Black family to have around about that time.
Mhm,
But the extraordinary thing about them,
mhm,
um, and sort of the lineage of it, my great grandmother, my grandmother's mom, actually had property conveyed to her through the work her parents did um, on land as slaves.
mhm,
And the plantation owner of that time actually was one of the kinder
mhm.
and didn't have anyone else to leave the land to. And so he conveyed it upon my family, and we still own it. It's in Snowden, Alabama, over 300 acres of property that was passed down in our family. That's sort of a legacy for all of us. But the interesting thing about my grandmother, she was the only girl,
Mhm.
and they still had a sense of it wasn't proper for her to work the farm. That was for the boys, but they wanted her to get educated. And so she was sent to learn from a woman named Georgia Washington, who has a middle school named after her in Montgomery, which is also the middle school that me and my brother and sister all went to. This is the woman that taught my grandmother.
Wow.
And then she came back and taught all of her brothers how to read. And they then went on to get educated. They graduated from high school and went to college and then became professionals, whether it was in the educational field, being ultimately presidents of Trenton Technical College that's here in Montgomery, or one of my uncles became a dentist. The other one became his dental technician that made all of the equipment and partials and all that that went in the mouth. They worked together. And my grandmother was a longtime school teacher, then became a principal, and I believe she was the first Black principal in Montgomery, Alabama. And then she went on to be what they called at that time, we're all familiar with what the PTA is today, but back then everything was segregated. So there was the National Colored PTA, and she was the president of it. And through all of her accolades in education, she was actually invited to the White House for 3 sitting presidents and advised them on things about educational equality and integration.
Wow.
And so she now has an elementary school named after her here in Montgomery, which, interestingly enough, at the time that they were voting on the name, Martin Luther King Jr. was an option, and she won.
Wow.
So it's a very great legacy, and it's a lot of pride in knowing the strength of that story. And it's also a lot of pressure because the greatness that was achieved during a time that really was almost unheard of, and certainly in the Deep South, and certainly in a place like Montgomery. Um, it's just mind blowing to think about sometimes. And yes, they
That's
were all
huge.
members of Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church at the time that Martin Luther King Jr. was the pastor. And so they were very committed to all of the activism of that time, everything that led up to voting rights and civil rights in terms of the bus boycott and all of those things. They were very much a part of that.
Wow. I mean, what a great story. I mean, that makes me want to cry. What a wonderful story that
It
is.
is, it's amazing to think about. It
Wow.
is.